All right, so we've been talking a lot about box model. We've talked about being able to set layout properties such as the width and the height. We've also talked about setting padding and a border around something. Let's imagine for a second that I have these two sections, okay? This is InDesign, but it could be any kind of program really. In addition to setting how the width and the height is, I could also figure out how close these are to each other. There could be more space or less space. We could also figure out the space between the container and the edge of the document. This could be like the page or canvas or something like that. So we can do that in CSS. That is what we would refer to as a margin. Okay, so padding is the space between your content and the edge of the container. Margin is the space between HTML containers to one another, including its parent. Okay. So what does that mean? Well, let's go to exercise 8 here. And I'm going to preview this. Okay. So I have 3 sections here. And I'm going to set this up real quick. So let's do Dre. So I'm going to do a width. And let's do background color. And let's just put a little padding on it. Okay. And I'm going to do kind of the same for the other 2 here. So, we'll do the final one here. Okay, let's go back. Boom, boom, boom. All right, so I have each of these sections. They have widths, they have padding. I could put borders on them if I want. But right now, the Dr. Dre and the Nirvana section are like right up against each other, right? So what I'd like is for there to be a little bit of space around it. So the way you would do that is we could use margin, okay? I'm going to set the margin to 50 pixels. So what this is going to do is it's going to put 50 pixels on the top, 50 pixels on the right, 50 pixels on the bottom, and 50 pixels on the left in terms of like a buffer space. So when I do this, you can see not only does it push it off of this Nirvana, it actually pushes it off of the top and the left. The reason why is not only does it affect not only is it this div pushing this away, it's actually also affecting its parent, which is the body. So it's literally pushing off of the interior, pushing off of the body tag here. Okay. In this case, I don't necessarily want to put it on all 4 sides. I might just want to put it on one side. So maybe I'm going to do a margin bottom. So if I apply a margin bottom, it's going to apply to the bottom here, and let's set it to 100 pixels. Okay. And so now I'm getting kind of closer to what I want, which is putting space between these containers. Let's say I have the Nirvana here, and I'm going to set a margin left. Okay, so it's going to apply it to the margin left here. Let's say I put in, 250 pixels. Okay. I lied. Let's do 400. So you might look at this and go, oh, this is a great way for me to take a container and put it in the center, right? Well, there's a problem with that, which is that we can never really know how big the browser is going to be that our users are going to have. This is in the middle of this right now, but if I was to do something like this, or if I made my browser like really, really big, like this is no longer in the center, it's just 400 pixels from the left. So this is not the way we should do that. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a center. We're going to try to center this Spice Girls horizontally to the center of our page. Okay. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to apply margin right, which is the right side here. Actually, let's do it to margin left. I lied. I'm going to do margin left. And what I'm going to do is use a value called auto. Okay. What auto means is that it's going to take whatever extra space there is and put it all on the left side. Okay. So it doesn't matter how much space is in your browser, it's going to take that extra space and put it on the left. So I'm going to save. And what happens is, because all the space is over here, this gets kind of pushed to the right. Okay. If I had done this the other way, it would have taken all the extra space and put it on the right side as opposed to the left side. Okay. Well, let's try this. What if I did both margin right auto and margin left auto? What it would do is take the leftover space and put half of it on the right side and half of it on the left. When you do that, what you're really doing is you're centering your piece. And so this is now centered to the middle, horizontal middle of my page. You can tell that because if I make my browser bigger or smaller, you can see it's readjusting itself. Okay, so this is a great way to take a container and center that container to the horizontal middle of your page. You can actually see this in a lot of websites. So see how this design here is kind of centered if I make my page bigger or smaller? See how this always stays in the horizontal center here? So this is kind of that same idea of what I was just talking about. It's just a little more complicated, where it's taking all this material and it's putting it into the center. Okay. All right, a couple more properties we can play around with. Let me preview those. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this Jackie Chan, or I think it's just Chan. Give it a background color, and I'm going to set it to blue, and let's give it a width for 50 pixels. And let's put some padding on it, 25 pixels. Okay, I'm going to go back. Oops, I guess I skipped over the Bruce Lee. So what I'm going to do is, you can actually, normally when you apply things like the width and such, it's going to be these angled, 95-degree angled lines here. I want to round out my corners. So you can do that with a property called border radius. This is also another property here, and I'm going to set this to 25 pixels. What this is going to do is round out my edges. Okay, the higher the value, the bigger the amount. Okay, so now I get these nice rounded edges. If you don't want to do all four sides, there's a way to do it. Now normally we would do, border top, border bottom, but technically we don't want the top or the bottom, we actually want the corner. So you have to write it like this: border, you start with the horizontal and then the vertical, right top radius, or sorry, maybe it's I take it back. You do the vertical, then the horizontal. So if I do border top right radius, that means this one. And I can give that its own unique value. So it's rounding out this corner, but not the other three. And maybe I'll do the bottom left, so that would be border bottom left radius. So you could do top right, top left, top bottom left, bottom right radius. I'm going to set this to a different value. And you can see I'm getting kind of a unique design here. Okay. Another thing we could do, in addition to a border radius, is applying a drop shadow, or what's called a box shadow. A box shadow is a drop shadow to help have the box stand out. So we can do that. The property is called box shadow. It defaultly takes 4 properties: an X offset, a Y offset, a blur amount, and a color. Oops, I think I deleted it. The X offset is how much is the shadow going to be pushed to the right. So I'm going to make it move 10 pixels to the right. If I use a negative value, it would go 10 pixels to the left. The next value is the vertical offset, or the Y offset. If I do 10, that's going to push it down 10 pixels. If I use a negative value, it would go up 10 pixels. The next is how blurry your image is, or your shadow is. This is a Gaussian blur. So the higher the number, the more blurry it will be. I'm going to set it to 10 pixels. And then I can set a color. This is the color of the shadow. I'm going to set it to black. You could also use a hexadecimal value. If you don't put a value, it just defaults to black. And I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to go back. And this is my drop shadow. Okay. Like I said, if I wanted it less blurry, I could go back here and lower this value to, like, I don't know, 2 pixels maybe. See how much it's less blurry now? Let's say I wanted to push the shadow to the left. I would change the X value here to a negative, and I would push it over here. Or if I wanted to go up as opposed to down, I could set this to a negative Y value. A negative Y value pushes it up as opposed to down. Okay. You even don't even have to blur it. You could just make the, set this to 0. This is the blur amount. 0 blur means no blur. You get kind of this interesting design here. Okay. We can actually even use border radius to give us some unique design. So here I have an image, and my image is a square. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a class called image circle. Okay, and I'm going to use that border radius we just talked about. And I'm going to set this to 50%. So what that means is it's going to take 50% of the height and width and start to round it out. Well, if you do all 4 sides at 50%, the end result is actually going to be that you turn your image into a circle. Okay? So if you've ever taken an image and uploaded it to, like an avatar for a website like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, what they're doing is they're taking your image that's usually a square and they're rounding out the edges and they're getting something like this. So I could do a similar thing. I'm going to apply the same class to all of these little icons. And what's going to happen is all of these icons turn into circles. Okay, so you can take any image you upload, vector or raster, and using border radius, we can round them out. You see, this is a very popular kind of design right now. Or maybe, if you want to make kind of a more interesting design, let's use that border top left 50%, the top left radius. So that's going to be the top left. Let's set that to 50%. Let's do border bottom right radius, 50%. And so you can see I could get some unique designs here, all with CSS. No needing to, crop this in something like Photoshop or Photopea. All right, so once you try that out, that was exercise 8 and 9.